Today we will be talking about the 13 colonies and the 3 groups they were divided into by Thomas Tradnick,
Gilbert Wrestling,
and Charlie Henderson, Period 1 Social Studies with Mrs. Z. When the British first established colonies in the New World, or as we know it now America, had 13 colonies that were split up into 3 groups.
the New England colonies.
The Middle colonies,
and the Southern colonies.
The New England colonies consist of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. These colonies were established because the British could get natural resources on the land to get exports for money. These colonists relied on the ocean for their wealth. What they did in the ocean, they fished in the rich waters of the Gulf of Maine, and they also went whaling to use the fats from the whales for oils. But they also took their economy to the land by using the timber that was on the land for house building, shipbuilding, and tools. They even used some of the wood to burn for fuel so they could stay warm in the winters. They had a great relationship with Native Americans. One tribe, the Wampanoag, taught the people to farm and fish in the area. The English who settled here also traded metal axe heads and other tools to the natives for furs to use for coats to stay warm in the winter. The native people of New England were not driven out when the settlers came, but invited in so they could learn and experience the customs of the English, and the English could learn their customs as well.
Next we have the Middle colonies. They consist of Pennsylvania, Delaware, New York, and New Jersey. These colonies were established because they had a great climate and fertile soil, which allowed them to be really good in farming. Some things they grew in the Middle colonies were rye, wheat, barley, and corn. The Middle colonies were known as the breadbasket colony because of the fertile soil and the amount of wheat they grew. These colonies gained their money through farming more than needed for their families, and they sold the extra livestock and grain to the people in the cities. An important feature in the Middle colonies was the region's long, wide rivers, including the Hudson River and the Delaware River. They were so wide that ships could easily fit through them. The rivers were very helpful because they helped with hunting, and they made dugout canoes which were used for transportation and fishing. They also helped with transporting rye, wheat, corn, and barley. In the Middle colonies, there were native groups such as Algonquian and the Iroquois. When the Native Americans first settled in the Middle colonies, they settled along the Hudson River.
The Southern colonies are the oldest colonies and consist of Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. The Southern colonies were settled in due to claims of gold in the area and all the natural resources that could be used to gain exports for money. The resources would also help the British trade with other countries because they had resources that most countries didn't. The Southern colonies relied heavily on enslaved workers to tend to their tobacco plantations, while plantation owners did not do much work at all. Tobaccos could then be turned into cigarettes. Using slaves in the plantations affected the lives of millions of Africans that were taken away from their homes to go work for plantation owners with little to no pay. The plantations did not just grow tobacco, though. Wealthy plantation owners grew rice and indigo, all of which were cash crops for the plantation owners. Since the climate was warm and humid in the southern colonies, colonists could grow crops almost year-round due to the warm summers and mild winters. This made the growing season longer than any of the other colonies. Jamestown was the first place the English had settled in the Americas, which is in present-day Virginia. Though this was the first place the English had settled, it was not an easy first few years for the English settlers. Struggling through the harsh, cold winters, fighting the Native Americans, and the lack of food were just some of the struggles the settlers had faced. The Native Americans in the southern colonies were always fighting with the settlers and had very little trade with them.
Our group has agreed that if we could settle in any of the groups of colonies, we would settle in the southern colonies. We would settle here because there is lots of land that we could own. We would then have power, and we could have a plantation on the large flat land that we could use to grow cash crops such as tobacco or indigo. There is also a hot and humid climate, so we would be warm all year long so that we could make money with cash crops like tobacco and indigo.